Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of What the Field. I'm Emmeline.
My name is Gonzalo. Thank you for organizing this podcast, Emmeline.
Today, we're here with Charles Dowding, connecting via screen from England, and we're going to be talking about gardening and soil. So, thank you very much, Charles, for being with us here today.
It's a pleasure. Hello.
So, Charles, tell us, how did you become one of England's most famous gardeners? Maybe to introduce you a little bit more, why did I say one of England's most famous gardeners? You do have a YouTube channel with over 500,000 people watching you on there, 500,000 subscribers. Many of your videos have a lot more views than that. You have almost 400,000 followers on Instagram, so you are quite a gardener / influencer now, aren't you?
Yeah, well, it's been interesting for me because I've never aspired to that. I didn't set out to be well known or anything. I'm just a really keen gardener, and from doing it all my life, which is over 40 years now, I've worked out methods that I feel are much more easy and sustainable than most of the methods that I was coming across before. And I can see so many opportunities and ways that I can help people to garden more efficiently and effectively. And not only that, but to grow food that's more healthy for them. And so I like more and more actually to emphasize the link between what we grow and how we eat it. And that's why I just brought out a cookbook as well.
Wow.
And also, I can see very more now because of there's much more research finally about the biology of soil rather than just the chemistry. When I started out, it was all about chemistry and nutrients. I would hear comments like, the soil is like a bank balance, nutrients in, nutrients out. And people were not looking at the biology at all, even in the organic movement. That I found really strange because I signed up with the Soil Association to be a certified organic farmer in 1983. And it was more about avoiding chemicals than about the positives you can do to increase life and health. So that's where I found that no dig is so brilliant, and that's become my benchmark, the no dig method, not disturbing soil. And it's always been, for me, instinctive. I started off doing it in 1983 without realizing really all the benefits, but it just felt right. And there wasn't much knowledge about it in those days. And lately there is now a lot of interest. So I suppose you could say my star has risen with everyone else getting interested in what I'm doing. And it's been great, actually, the last 10, 15 years since I brought out my first book in 2007. I found that what I'm doing is now reaching a big audience, and it's a great pleasure to communicate with people like yourselves as well. Who would have thought doing a podcast with Spain? So, thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I'm curious about two things, like who teach you how to grow things, and who has had more influence in creating your consciousness, no? Because I can feel in your videos that you have a really strong consciousness about nature, about biodiversity. Which person has influenced you the most in teaching you and creating this consciousness?
Well, it's an interesting question. I found it quite hard to answer because I spent most of my life being frustrated by the teachings I'm given. I feel they're not addressing the whole story. They're not really explaining things. I keep, like in organic farming, you have something called the 4-year rotation. I'm sure you know about that one, and that's the teaching is that prevents pest and disease and all this kind of thing. But actually, when you have no dig, you've got such healthy soil that it kind of becomes irrelevant. And so I've spent a lot of my life unlearning things. But probably the person who triggered me and got me so interested in this, Eve Balfour, who founded the Soil Association. So she was in the 1930s and 40s, a long time ago. And then a lot of her knowledge sort of got a bit forgotten, really. But I go back to the 1930s and 40s for a lot of my original inspiration. And beyond that, I've just been finding things out as I go.
Very interesting. So, Charles, you mentioned the no-dig method twice now. I know that that's what you're most famous for, but maybe you could explain it a little bit to people who haven't heard of it yet.
Yeah, so it's really very simple. It's it's just about leaving. There's two parts, if you like. Leave soil undisturbed as much as possible. Sometimes you need to dig a hole to plant a tree or something like that. That is allowed. And the second part is feeding soil life. So it's the life in the soil which maintains the structure, the aeration, the drainage, which enables plant roots to find the food they need through the mycorrhizal network. Everything happens through the busyness of organisms in the soil. And with vegetable growing, I find it most effective to feed them with a mulch or surface layer of compost, which they then eat and process. And that maintains incredible vitality and fertility in the soil in a very easy way. So you're concentrating on making nice compost and disturbing the soil as little as possible. And really, that's it. It's so simple. And beyond that, the details are slightly different. If you want to scale up and grow, maybe like in your case, large plantations of orchards or whatever, then the details are different, but or fields of wheat, then you wouldn't be using such large amounts of compost, and you would be using some machinery just to scratch the surface a little bit. But the principle is very much minimal soil disturbance and feed soil life with organic matter wherever possible.
And then you automatically have less weeds, is what you say, right?
Well, that's the beautiful thing. It's, amazing how few weeds grow, I find, when soil is in a fertile, happy condition. And I use that word deliberately. It might sound odd to refer to soil as happy. But, soil is a being, and, it's the earth's skin, as we know. And when you look after it, it doesn't have that same need to grow weeds. And there's very nice illustration, well, not nice. In 1987, I had a piece of spare ground, and there was a big shortage of organic carrots in London. So the wholesaler asked me if I could grow some, and I didn't have enough space on my existing no-dig beds, which at the time covered 3.5 hectares. But I had this 1/4 hectare of ground spare, and I rotivated it with a tractor because I didn't have time to make beds or do any proper no-dig. And then got a contractor to drill the carrots. And after that soil cultivation, I got so many weeds, where normally I wasn't getting weeds. And I got so many weeds that even though we hoed the carrots 3 times to try and kill the weeds, we didn't harvest one single carrot. There were just so many weeds. So that really taught me about, when you disturb the soil and don't look after it, how weeds are a healing part of the healing process. And with no-dig, you're doing the opposite. So you leave it alone, and we still weed, but it's very quick, and we don't need much time for weeding, and the weeds pull out easily, the soft surface. It just works beautifully.
Is the no-dig methodology working also in other parts of the world, like with other climate conditions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously I didn't know to start with, but from the feedback I receive on social media, it's really positive. So I'm getting lovely comments, like on Facebook, for someone this year who's in high desert in Utah, really dry, arid climate, and they put on 1 dressing of compost mulch and planted their sweet corn, their corn and squash. And I think they watered once, he said, and he was amazed, so it grew. And so, it's good in dry climates. Then I had a comment from the Philippines and someone in a tropical rainforest environment, and they said, this no-dig is brilliant. We get good moisture retention because they still have some dry periods, but he said the drainage also is excellent. And because it's just working with nature, really, I suppose. The details vary, but the principle works really well.
If you were not, sorry to for this difficult question, but if you were not a gardener, what would you be?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I'd be a teacher, I think. I really like connecting with people and sharing great understandings, and particularly, especially now, I suppose, because I'm older, I really love connecting with younger people, and I can see so much what they want to learn and where they need help. And in fact, I've just written a book, the children's gardening book, and already the response we're getting from that is really encouraging. So that's where I would be teaching.
Oh, that's beautiful. I mean, I think that young people, as we can see with all the movements that are going on at the moment, are really like the driving force that want to protect the planet. And one of the big issues is the declining biodiversity, right? And I was wondering, on an individual level, what can someone with a garden do to enhance and protect biodiversity from your point of view?
Well, yeah, great. The first and main thing you can do is the no-dig approach, where because of the biodiversity in soil. When I started organic, that bit of it was totally being ignored. Not totally, but very close to total. And so, when people talked about wildlife, they were referring to what you see above ground: insects, animals, flowers, plants, trees, and not much about what's happening underground, because we don't see it. So I would say to anybody, just do some no dig, which basically it's very simple. You leave your soil alone, like I was saying, and put some organic matter on the surface. It doesn't have to be composted. If you compost is great for when you want to grow vegetables in particular, because they're quite difficult plants to bring nicely to fruition. But for many plants, just any rough organic matter on the surface is great. And you're already on the way to achieving fantastic biodiversity and helping a lot of life to happen in your little garden. And I would say also that that's really important for all of us to do, because for two reasons. One is it's going to help produce more food, which we all need. And secondly, it's going to be really good for you in other ways. The wildlife in your own organism, like, we're finding out more and more now how the soil microbiome, the tiny organisms in the soil, are very similar to what's in our guts, in our digestion. And so that we can make stronger health link with that when we eat some produce that we've grown ourselves. Anybody who grows their own food, it's you're going to improve your health. It's good.
So really interesting. It's like the whole microbiome thing, right?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of papers on that recently. I think it's really a fascinating topic.
It's great for us as organic
all levels.
regenerative farmers.
Yeah, farmers, gardeners, even private households. I mean, this creating biodiversity. I have an optimistic point of view for the future generations, because the more and more they are getting consciousness about that. No, like, thanks to your books and thanks to all these conversations that are rising. I see a lot of conversation rising about the biodiversity in Europe, and I think this is creating something in the new generations.
Yes, and also how it all plays together, and it's not just an individual act, but it's all in harmony, and we need to keep sort of that balance. It's also one of the pillars of regenerative agriculture at the end of the day, to have balance and harmony between the different...
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that, but I would have a worry though about it, and that is that in farming, I see it's two quite different worlds, really. Gardening and market gardening, what I'm doing and what you're doing more larger scale, you've got different economic constraints, and I worry about whether they're going to hold back adoption of these lovely methods, because everybody has to make a living, and then you've also got big corporations who have a lot of money, and they're promoting non-regenerative methods very actively. And how one deals with that is another question, isn't it? I mean, that's more your domain.
Yeah. So I think conversations like this, so that the one that has the power to change these non-regenerative methods is the customer. No, I mean, we are. So we need to create this consciousness in customers. They and the good thing that I see, maybe I'm too much optimistic, is that the more and more the rise of customers with big consciousness is raising. No, like when I start cultivating things organically, my father say, "Who is going to buy for you?" I mean, there is not so many people that really cares where the fruit come from and how. And he changed his mind in the last 10 years, no, because now we grow a company from 2 people to 50 people, so we are like 50 people dedicating ourselves to cultivate all the year round. And yeah, I mean, we cannot compete against supermarkets because we just direct sales represents less than 1% in Europe, but it's rising. The more and more people are looking for ways how to buy directly from farmers, and they want to learn how farmers grow these things.
And if they want to learn how to grow things on their own, do you think that they could? Do you think that someone who has a garden could basically feed themselves with their garden, or is it not that simple? Even if they do watch all of your videos, let's say.
Yeah, well, it depends for sure how much ground you have. But using the methods I teach, it's very, very possible because it's so time efficient. And it's actually resource efficient as well, because where I've got 2 beds here, I'm doing a trial that's just finishing its 10th year now. And I've got 2 beds, so 1.5 meters wide, 5 meters long, each one. And they both receive the same amount of compost every year. And one bed I dig, I put in a spade and lift the soil and put the compost in the trench I make. And so that bed is dug, and the one next to it, I apply the same amount of compost, but it's no dig. And it's a lot quicker. But what's interesting is over 10 years, the no-dig bed is consistently 10 or 15% higher yielding more food for the same amount of input. You know, the same amount of organic matter has gone to that soil, but it's growing 10 or 15% more food. So for me, that's a really useful result, because sometimes people will say to me, "Oh, I couldn't do no-dig because I can't get enough compost." And I say, well, actually, for the amount of compost you've got, you are going to get more food when you go no-dig. You know, that's a simple fact, because we're keeping carbon in the soil. When soil is disturbed, that some carbon oxidizes to CO2, as we're finding out. So, you know, it's a fantastically environmentally friendly way, which also gives us more food to eat. So going no-dig will be a start, and then it just depends how much land you've got, whether you can feed yourself. But it's a great educating process too. And what you'll notice is, if anybody's listening to this who hasn't done it, you'll find the flavor of your food is so much better, and that will inspire and encourage you. And the thing about the gut biome too, you know how the gut is 1/4 of our brain, and I'm convinced that that's going to be a big help in getting these methods more out there, because people's brains, you know, you get more alert and alive and start to question things. Maybe we all need to question things more, I feel. Yeah. And you know, I was really encouraged to hear you say what you said, Gonzalo, and I congratulate you on being so positive as well. If the world had thousands more people like you, and that would just be where we want to go.
Thank you very much. You are very invited to come and to continue this conversation in a dinner with your veggies and my oranges.
Great. Yeah. But we all between us, we need to make this positive energy, don't we? And that's what I'm getting from you. That's what I like.
I like it for you too. I mean, you have a really optimistic view, and I love it, because of course there is a lot of reasons to be pessimistic, but okay, so you are living the life that you want, and you are happy, and I think that you should be. I mean, you should know you are already an inspiration for a lot of people that wants to cultivate things at home, and
no, even just make a difference biodiversity wise, right? So because in this whole pessimism, I think people get a little like almost comatose in the sense of, okay, I cannot do anything anyways, this is all out of my hands. Whereas, I don't know, maybe you have a different opinion, but I feel like having a garden, you can already make a difference, because you can ensure that there's bees there that find food, for example, right? So you can already ensure soil health, at least in your own garden.
And be empowered yourself, you know, that, because you're actually doing something. And as we've hinted, you know, that we're surrounded by really negative messages in most of the media. Actually, that's what the media lives on, isn't it? Is you don't get the good news is not a story, sadly. But this is a good news story, and that's something. Look, I get a lot of feedback along those lines. They say, "Hey, no dig, it's all good news, isn't it?" Actually, it is. And
Especially
so
now with
part of it is that in the gardening world, there hasn't been. People tend to concentrate on the technique, but there's the subtle energy behind it, which is how it can fire you up and give you enthusiasm and energy, partly through the food you're eating, but through contact with that biome. Just going out into the garden, into an outdoor space, you're picking up things like Bacilli vacca, which are bacteria that is floating around near in soil and plants. And when you get a bit of them, you breathe them in, or eat something, you get them in your brain, and that helps to make serotonin, which is the feel-good mood factor. So there's very precise biological processes which are happening through doing this, and that's all really powerful knowledge.
That's true.
Charles, two more difficult questions. What would you love to grow, but you cannot grow because of your climate conditions?
Probably a lot of things you grow. I'd love to grow avocados. I've seen avocado trees in California, and apparently they're not difficult to grow. And I love avocados, so that would be something for sure.
Good. And yeah, for me, the last thing will be, what is the latest remarkable thing you have learned? The latest remarkable thing you have learned about gardening?
Wow. Well, quite a lot, actually. It's more and more about the biology. That thing I mentioned about the feel-good hormones that we can generate just through being outside. And I don't feel until recently that science has looked enough at these sort of hidden biological processes. And also it worries me a bit because there's no money to be made there for anything, so no research is going to happen. So but one thing I've been learning is to really look a bit and talk to other gardeners. I've learned that I can learn a lot from talking to other people, and that's where social media has been fantastic. The feedback I get, what I need to work out is how to keep that balance, between I need enough time to be creative and also to run my garden, and then I need time to talk to other people and get their feedback as well. So if any of you are listening, and I'm really happy to hear from you always, and that we can all build information together, I feel. So, yeah.
I think from our side too, like having the opportunity to receive direct feedback from the people that is receiving and eating our oranges is something quite new. Usually the farmers, they don't get feedback from the people eat their food, and this is so frustrating. And people from Vetra, this is my hometown, they were amazed about why is these people from, because at some point there were like people from France, from Germany, from UK, like coming to visit the farm, and they were quite surprised because Vetra is not a touristic town. So they were, why are the people traveling to Spain to visit your farm? I say, yeah, because they are interested in organic farming. I say, but really, do they travel to see orange trees? I mean, this surprise to my neighbors in Vetra a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, the beach is close by, but.
Yeah.
So, in your exchanges with people, you must have come across quite a few misconceptions people have about gardening. Maybe you could name like your top 2 or top 3.
Yeah, absolutely. God, I mean, that's been the story of my life, really. Unraveling this bad knowledge or bad ideas. The first one is digging. So quit that one. No dig. Another one would be the 4-year rotation I mentioned, which has always been a central plank, even of organic growing, that we have to grow different plants every year. In the same piece of ground mustn't grow the same type of plant.
Basically, to avoid monoculture, right?
Yeah, sure. Monoculture,
like,
that's interesting. That's quite a negative word. But there's ways of, why 4? That's it. Actually, the 4-year rotation comes from 18th century farming in Norfolk in the UK, of the Earl of Townsend, who developed the 3-year medieval rotation into a 4-year rotation. And that was farming with animals, but it's not applicable to gardening. Anyway, so to find out more, I've been doing trials again, and I grow potatoes in the same ground every year. And this year was the 8th consecutive year of growing potatoes in the same soil. And in normal farming or gardening, that's something you just don't do. But I'm finding with no dig, it's fine actually. What I do is actually I grow a variety of potatoes that matures by the middle of July. We harvest them, and then we have the rest of the season to grow leeks. So every year it's potatoes, leeks, potatoes, leeks, potatoes, leeks. And we're just harvesting today, actually, some of the leeks also growing in their 8th year. They're pretty nice. But the potatoes this year, in the 8th year growing potatoes, they were fantastic. We had more than ever and super healthy. And also I'm saving my own seed. That's something else you're not meant to do. I'm not too sure why. So I keep my own potatoes and replant them the following spring. So yeah, I'm always looking to think outside the box, question why we've been told certain ways that you have to do things. It's often not applicable. I'd urge anyone else, that it's empowering to work out your own methods. I'm sure you're doing it as well.
Yeah, and have a lot of, I don't know if this is a word in English, but I have a lot of autocritic, no? And
So yeah.
Good.
Right.
And try new
Autocritical.
things. Yeah. So thank you very much, Charles. It has been a really inspiring conversation. We have learned a lot. I love to see people with your experience, like spreading the word and communicating what you have learned. And at least from people like me, I consider myself more a farmer than a gardener, but I see that in some time of my life I will love to become a gardener, but because I think that gardeners have a more relaxed life than farmers.
I actually, before we end this podcast, I did have one very last question, just because I'm very interesting to have your perspective on this. And then, there's this whole discussion going around that we're basically threatening our food security by pushing for organic agriculture, like organic farming, I guess you could say, also applies. Do you believe that by not using chemical fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, all of that, you are producing less than someone who does?
What a question. I mean, that's amazing. It's amazing that anyone can even ask that question. I know it's not your question, it's what people say, because it's a total inverse, upside down. It's turning falsehood into truth, basically, and vice versa. Because with organic methods, you are preserving wildlife. And what the chemical farmers using fertilizers and now also genetically modified organisms, which I think is really dangerous. Nobody's really knows. But what they're doing is they're disrupting wildlife. And we're heading to a point, if we're not careful, where wildlife is so challenged, and I include in that the life in the soil, which everything comes from in the end. We've got to look after our soil. And fertilizers damage soil. Pesticides damage soil. Weed killers damage soil. They damage soil life. There's now quite a bit of research on this, but it's being kept down because there's so much money invested in the alternative, which is promoting the horrible use of chemicals. And that's why we don't hear enough, actually, about that this statement is completely wrong. And it really should be squashed on the head immediately. We need organic methods because otherwise we're in danger, really. And everybody should pay attention to that. So yeah, that's very much my take on it.
Okay, thank you. That was great. I think we do feel the same, but it's nice to hear other people with other perspectives and other experiences confirming what maybe people like Gonzalo are seeing on their own farms.
Yeah.
Can I just add actually something which I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you both, and for me as a gardener, we've referred to it a few times, that difference between the world of gardening and farming, and it's great that we're having this conversation because we do move in different domains, but we have so much in common, and it's always good to support each other, isn't it? So thank you very much.
Completely agree. Thank you so much, Charles, for having the time to discuss with us so openly these questions. I really loved to record this podcast with you, and I hope that this conversation continues in the real life.
Absolutely. Yeah. See you soon.
See you soon.
Thank you very much, Charles, and thank you to our audience as well for listening and viewing this episode, for taking this little field trip into the world of soil and gardening with us and Charles Dowding. And yeah, until next time, bye.